We're born, in fact, how many here have ever held a newborn in your hands? If you were to describe, if you go back and once again hold that newborn in your hands, and go into the actual position that you held that newborn, think back and really tap into it, and you were to describe the essence of that newborn, what would it be?
Perfect.
Love. Perfect, love,
Awesome.
awesome, pure,
Radiant.
radiant,
Wonderful smell.
wonderful smell, yeah, sweet energy. Now, you'll notice, and I've asked this question of tens of thousands of people, everybody's answer to that question is always some variation on the theme of love. What do you have to do to take a being, you, that is love, and convince us to function in a way that is other than love? And I would offer what you have to do is you have to put a giant thumbprint on that being. And those giant thumbprints that come in take us out of our being and transform us into something else. And this usually happens in relationship with a power person. So here comes this new being that is love. No question about it. You are, I am. We all started out that way. I don't care what culture I go to on this planet, the adults of that culture describe the newborn as love. Not many of them describe themselves as love, however. Why? Because we bought into something. We had a power person who was not functioning as love, who love had been killed in. And when we were confronted with that person who had more control over our lives than we did, we tended to give up the experience of our true selves as love in exchange for another being. And as we did that, we created in our minds, idea by idea, false idea by false idea, a being, or I should say more correctly, a non-being. The love is being. Hostility and fear is of non-being. But we created a non-being in our minds based on the way we perceived our power person's needs. And we created that image because we were intimidated into that in order to survive, in order to fulfill our power person's needs. So in effect, what we did was we opened up a file in our minds, and into that file went all of the false ideas that came from the power person. When the power person was in trauma and not living out of love with the child took on a set of ideas of what it was supposed to do in order to survive with the power person. Idea by idea, a self, or more correctly, a non-self, was built into brain cells. And a moment of great trauma happens in the average human life. And that's the moment at which this being called love gives up its true nature and shifts over into identity with this non-being that it has built into its mind. Forevermore, until this person goes back through the moment where they gave up being. And let me say that the moment at which each of us gave up being was one of the greatest moments of trauma in our lives. And when we go back and recapture that moment and move back into being, it can be one of the greatest reliving of those traumas of our lives. If we can remember when we're going back through that, as we go back through and heal that part of us, the memory of pain from that experience is nothing but a memory of pain. It is not real pain, but it is usually experienced as real pain. And so this interaction with the power person builds into the mind and creates a body that is based in trauma. And the non-being self is based in trauma. And the rage at having to give up the true self in order to function as this human doing. This is the point we move from a human being to a human doing. the rage is so overwhelming that it has to be hidden and suppressed. It's the kind of rage that many people talk about, that they say, well, I could never go back and let myself feel that, because if I did, I'd kill somebody. Anybody ever had that feeling? Yeah. If I did, I'd never stop crying. Anybody ever had that one happen? That's the pain that happens at the moment where we give up being in order to function as a human being doing. Now, once this trauma body is built, it likes to feed. How many have ever lived in a world where you decided you wanted to live as love, you got in contact with love, and man, that's what you were going for until somebody triggered your trauma body. And then what you did is you went out and you looked for more trauma. Because that's what this thing wants to do in order to survive. Or it appears to want to do, but it really doesn't even have a wanter. It isn't capable of wanting anything. It's simply an accumulation of false ideas about who we thought we were supposed to do in order to survive with our power person. When we do life out of this self, it will seem that there are only three options to life. The first option is figuring it out. If I could just figure this out, everything would be fine. How many have spent years of their lives trying to figure it out? Guess what? Figuring it out won't do it. The second option is, if I could just achieve the goal of fulfilling my power person's needs, then everything would be all right. This is the people pleaser who runs around trying to do everything for everybody. It isn't the solution to life. It won't work. The third solution for the person who lives out of this non-being self is, if I could just control everything and everybody, so that nobody could get close enough to my pain, and people will arrange their whole lives so no one gets to resonate that unconscious part of themselves. And that resident unconscious pain creates all of the physical, mental, and emotional pain that we will experience throughout all of our lives. And because we don't have the tools, accessing it seems almost impossible. And that's the point at which we become the user. We use everybody else, we take our unconscious pain, put it into our brain's image of others, blame them for our pain. And we use them to keep from having to face our pain directly. So there are the three solutions as long as you're living out of non-being. And the only solution to the dilemma is the opposite of that. Those three solutions will never solve the problems in your life. What will solve the problems in your life is when you find the process of forgiveness and you begin to erase, you begin to erase these false ideas. The three solutions that the non-being self presents will never work. The only solution is when we find the tools with which to reach in and start to erase these false ideas of who we thought we were. You'll remember in the scriptures they offered a solution. They said, in order for you to live, you've got to die. That doesn't make any sense until you understand this. In order for you being to live, the non-being that you thought you were has to die. It has to go. Forgiveness removes idea by idea, thought by thought, the non-being self from brain cells. When that disappears, there is a place for what was called rebirth. You know, you've had the question perhaps thrown at you from someone who's in their trauma body, have you been reborn? And you feel like if you don't have the right answer, you might be puked on. Anybody ever been in that position? Because it's coming from one who doesn't know what this experience is, but they've been told something about being reborn. There is a rebirth that happens, and that is that the being, this erasure that took place, disappears, and this being becomes expressed through their own body-mind unit again. Because the non-being self has been removed. That's the actual experience of being reborn. And it comes out from doing the body of work that was presented by this man Yeshua. He did not come to bring a belief system to believe in. He brought a body of work to be done. And the forgiveness work was that every time you took something out of here and put it into your brain's image of someone else, if you forgave it, then you would dismantle this non-being self. And you get to show up in your life again. The average person in our culture, I would offer, is dead by the age of 4. And it takes another 70 or 80 years for the bodies to fall over. In order for you being to live, the non-being self has got to go. The false self has at its root the original resentment we felt at having to give up the true self. It was the trauma that was sourced from being used, and that was as a result of the decision we made that we had to fulfill our power person's needs, feeling used by them and feeling deprived of our birthright. And I would offer that your birthright and my birthright is to experience ourselves, our power persons, and everybody around us, our siblings, our neighbors, as beings of love, as who they really are. Has anybody ever felt deprived of your birthright? It's the specialty of the world to deprive us of our birthright, all the while talking about love. So, being deprived of that birthright, we give up our true selves. And the resentment we have is the result of this non-being self taking over our lives. And all relationships that come out of the non-being self end up in resentment. That's why we've got a divorce rate that runs in excess of 60% in our culture. And at the same time, out of that profile that we build into brain cells, that set of ideas of non-being that we build in, we build a physical, mental, psychological profile of the self we think we need to be to survive and that we think is in danger. This self always thinks it's in danger. It can't trust the world because there's always another blind side coming. There's always another attack coming. And as long as you allow that self to control your life, life is hell. When we start to dismantle that self, we can step back into something else, and that is our being. As long as the non-being self is in control, we think we need to keep the truth hidden from ourselves. And so we live in a state, which the average human lives in, of blockage of truth. Blockage of truth is a state of loving your own opinion more than you love the truth. Each time your power person was not in being, you created another set of brain cells for this non-being self. Each traumatic interaction sets in the mind a series of false trauma-based ideas which we become identified with. A big key in the process is to give up your identification with that non-being self. And to start to work with the people that you're going to enter into interdependent relationships with, to stop identifying with their trauma-based selves. To begin to see the being that they are. To see the being that they are. And as you see the being that another is, even when they're in non-being, you strengthen the being in yourself. And each time you forgive, you weaken the power that the non-being has over your life. The false self feeds on its trauma. It needs trauma to live. And it is that trauma that creates fear and the rage that controls so much of our culture. Again, our original rage is about having been pulled out of being and having to give up the direct experience of love to survive. And it happens so early for most people that it's totally and completely unconscious. Is everybody breathing, by the way? Because this is a point that just touches so deeply in each of us, that to keep your breath open is to be able to really be able to process through this information and move forward. And to face that unconscious or non-being self and to bring it up piece by piece and take it apart with forgiveness is to step back into real life. If the non-being self governs your life, and I just invite you to look around at your own life. Just look at your relationships and situations in your life. What will happen is you will tend to be stuck with three behaviors. There will only be three choices. Pardon me, I shouldn't say choices because they're not choices. They're reactions. You know, the word react is when somebody says, how did you react? Break that word down. How did you redo an act that was done on a previous occasion? Being has choice. Non-being has no choice. It works on what we call in our Laws of Living course a part of the brain that functions out of automatic decisions. We call it the automatic decision system. And as long as you're functioning out of the automatic decision system, as long as you're functioning out of the automatic decision system, what you will do is these ideas, these false ideas, when triggered into activity, will take charge of your life. Has anybody ever found themselves in the position of that fellow named Paul who said, why is it the things I would do, I cannot do? And the things I would do, I can't. Ever been stuck in that position? Why do I do the things that I don't want to do? How many have ever been there? Do you know why? Because your automatic decision system holds ideas that came from this interaction with your power person. And when that's triggered into activity, it takes over your behavior. This is where choice exists. Choice does not exist here. All this is a resonance-based device. In fact, this non-being self has a cheap copy of everything that's real in the spiritual dimension, and the non-being self cheap copy of reason or choice is resonance. Situation shows up, triggers brain cells, and it goes totally against your own will and choice to do a behavior, and you do it anyway. Why? Because if you're living out of non-being, you're limited to three behaviors, and here are the three behaviors. And the key to understand about these behaviors is that it's all based on the level of stress in your mind. That's why, and why is this happening to me again, we've got a key stress management tool. That is the forgiveness process. That eradicates the stress. So just take a look over the period of your life at how you behaved. And if you've been functioning out of non-being, here's how you behaved. When there's been no stress in your life, you've done whatever you did to get along with your power person. Automatically. When stress starts to build, you shift it into doing what you did to resist and survive with your power person. This is the power person here. Stress starts to build, automatic decision system kicks in, and you do what you did to resist and survive with your power person. And then, the coup de grace, when you become ultra stressed, your automatic decision system kicks in, doing the behavior that you hated most that your power person did to you. Just look at your life. And that's the way the non-being self runs. It is so predictable that all I need to do is talk to you for 10 minutes and you tell me about your power person, and I will tell you exactly how you behave in your life. And you start to look at your words, and your words will key you back into how that all worked in your life. Forgiveness is how you go in and you remove this non-being from control of your life. The root of every relationship made out of these behaviors, the root of every relationship formed out of the non-being self is resentment, trauma, fear, and rage. People wonder why relationships get so crazy. Once the false self is created in brain cells, it will forevermore create scenarios, that is realities. Remember Paul said, we see as though through a glass darkly? It will forevermore create scenarios that justify everything that it has come to believe, and it will generate realities that demand and rationalize all the skills that it has honed and developed. War, intimidation, fight, anger, rage, attack, gossip, slander. It's got a story that says that's how you make it in the world. And everything that comes from the non-being self is a slippery lie. You've got to be, if you want to move out of the non-being self and actually get back to choice, where, unlike Paul, you can say, the things that I choose to do are what I do. The things I choose not to do, I don't go near it anymore. That's what being can do. But it can't do it if there's a lot of emotional pain still attached in this image of self. And the reason why, when ultra-stressed, we do the behavior that we hated most that our power person did, is because when we were this high, our power person was a god. And in our unconscious, we look back to how did God win? And the situations where they did what they did to overpower us and control us because they had more power than we did, we look back in the mind and unconsciously go, oh, that's how when the stress is up and the chips are down, you win. And that's the behavior that will tend to take over. So when they look at what the power person did when the stress was up and the chips are down, the automatic decision system takes over and drives us there. And it always has a really good story as to why that's necessary. I offer that this is the root cause of every conflict in the world. It is the root cause of war. It is the root cause of murder. It is the root cause of verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. It is the root cause of all of it. Rage is the cause of at least 110% of the pain in the world. But most people can successfully suppress it. And, of course, at the same time as that energy is active, the mind will find somebody to blame. And this dynamic I would offer is passed from generation to generation. On an energetic level, you go back into the ancient teachings, we talked earlier about the wages of, or the idea of sin being an energy that's off the target. And you remember they told us the wages of sin is death. And when I was a kid, that was like some kind of theological threat. God's going to get you because you sinned. No, nothing to do with it. It was just information as to how this energy system worked. That if you put an energy in that doesn't belong, remember the scientists have discovered it becomes a neuropeptide. The neuropeptide turns into a chemical in the cell, and the cell that receives the chemistry of things like hatred and fear and anger and anguish and trauma and terror is degenerative chemistry. The cell starts to fall apart. I would offer that's the only cause of our diseases. And you remember they went further and they said the sins of the father will be passed again to 3 and 4 generations. Like God's going to get you for what your fathers did or what Adam did thousands of years ago. That's not what they were saying at all. In the Aramaic, they were simply telling you how an energetic system called the body worked. And that every thought you think, every feeling you feel, every reality you engage in is stored holographically in every cell. And that frequency, that energy is passed from generation to generation. And once we wake up from that, we can put an end to the generational disorders. We can take charge of our own genetic structures and remove what never belonged in the first place. Now, as long as we're stuck in that non-being self, we'll have a pretty weird definition of love. And the definition of love will be fulfilling my power person's needs. This is what leads. Anybody ever felt smothered in a relationship? How does that happen? Well, you're in a relationship with someone whose definition of love is not their being, but rather it's their doing. And they think if they can just do enough for you, the substitute for their power person, then everything will be okay. And that is not love. That comes totally and completely out of non-being. When you get 2 people doing this, each having their own unique definition. I remember having a woman in an intensive a few years back, and she had had a relationship with a man for about 20 years, and he died. But she said, I realize now, that was always such a wonderful relationship. And I realized why is because our power persons were the same. So we just traded off. I did what satisfied my power person, he did, and it worked fine. But the problem with that, even though it seemed like a wonderful relationship, is both of them had to live in non-being to do that, to live there. And that's not life. Life begins for an adult human being the day that we become responsible for what's going on inside of us that's less than love and remove it and start to introduce being back into our physiology. The day we become responsible for what's going in is the day that life begins again. It was ended very early for most people. So this whole process of the power person dynamic becomes part of and the root of the reality formation system. And every reality that the mind generates from that day forward until that dynamic in physiology is forgiven will be part of what the mind outputs. It'll be part of the reality structure. And it will show up anywhere and everywhere. One of the things I get to do a lot of as I travel and teach is go into companies or churches or medical offices where those dynamics are showing up. Because all of those dynamics play out in every reality that the mind generates. And love is not fulfilling the perceived needs of your power person and the person you're in relationship fulfilling yours. Love comes when you get to re-experience your being. Otherwise, you will function as a human having, a human doing, or a human getting. And that becomes a substitute for being. Now, when you begin to heal, you may do many of the same behaviors. But the behaviors come from being and therefore are alive, rather than coming from non-being and therefore dead. Everything, remember Yeshua said, let the dead bury the dead? Everything that comes from this, even if it's wonderful, it's still dead. It's only when it's filled with being and comes from being that it's actual life and that we're really alive. So our being has to be present to experience love because that's the stuff we're made of. And many people try to get to love by looking at someone who is functioning out of being. They'll look at the great beings of history and they'll say, oh, this is what you do in order to experience love. And they'll do it. And it all comes from the doing side. It only becomes actual life when we experience it from the being side. And that's where life begins. When we attempt to fulfill the needs of our power person, that we try to fulfill for our power person in relationship with someone else, we think and we imagine that this person has the same needs our power person has. And there's a tendency for rage to come out when they don't appreciate all the efforts that we do to show how much we love them. And vice versa. When you get two people, it gets really crazy. How much time do you spend in your life experiencing being compared to trying to fulfill your power person's needs in your relationships or your own needs that came from those power person dynamics? The form of love that is about fulfilling your power person's needs is based in resentment and comes from hatred. Because this is all based in that kind of energy. Now, in a codependent relationship, we think we're actually interacting with another person. So let's take this to the next level. Let's take this non-being that started out as a child and let's grow them up. They have a file. Out of that file is their human doingness. They came from a relationship with their power person. And this is the self they think they are. This is a non-being in their mind. They go into relationship with someone who tends to have a similar, or pardon me, a complementary bag of garbage about the non-being self. This creates the ideal relationship that's called a marriage made in heaven. In the world. But it's really a relationship based in matching bags of garbage. How do you tell if it's a relationship based in matching bags of garbage? Have you ever had a love relationship that turned to a hate relationship? Okay. A love relationship can never turn to a hate relationship. A being-based relationship will always remain love. It doesn't matter how much garbage you got. But if it's based in non-being, the minute that this person stops doing the things that keep you out of touch with your pain, your unconscious rage, the minute they stop doing that, you'll take your whole bag of garbage and dump it on them. That's called matching bags of garbage relationships. So now what we have in this situation is two non-beings interacting. But it gets more complicated than that. Because here's what happens next. We've been taught that the world is filled with bodies. And so when we meet another person, we open a file and we start to build into brain cells ideas, and we hook ideas in our minds up that we have about this person. And the body that we have a relationship with, remember in physics, there are no bodies. It doesn't exist. And so we now have, out of this file that we opened when we went into relationship with this person, and the brain cells it comes from are somewhat based in the relationship with them because we built them while we were having a relationship with them. But if they're a body, we still have a relationship with a non-being. And you get two people doing this, and now you have four non-beings in relationship. Anybody ever wonder why relationships get complicated? You've got four non-beings, and you've got two possible beings here. But this isn't the end of the complexity. We've got a whole other wrinkle to put into it. And that wrinkle is that at the same time, is everybody breathing? At the same time as you were building this non-being self about yourself, you were building a file based on your interaction with your power person. So even if your power person is dead and gone decades ago, they're alive and well in brain cells. And that power person image lurks your whole life long. Until what happens? Let's get the picture complete. Each one's got a power person. And of course, a lot of people want to blame their power person for their problems. The truth is, your power person had a power person. Who had a power person? Who had a power person? They're just family dynamics that are passed on. Somebody's got to say the buck stops here and change it. Take responsibility and start to dismantle it, acquire the skills and the tools. That's what Yeshua's teaching is about 2,000 years. It's got nothing to do with theology. Here's how it works, folks. Here's how you stay in relationship with God. God is love. You want relationship with God? All you have to do is stay in relationship with love. When you give up relationship with love, you've given up relationship with God. And it's not religious in the sense of religions presenting it today. It's just simple. You're designed to be in relationship and connected to love because it's your being. However, if we get two people who have a power person, then they're going to have a fairly good relationship as long as these two files that are actually built in relationship to each other are in charge of their brain's image of that person. But one day, one of these people is going to do a behavior that will resonate and have them put this person into their power person file. And here's what happens. the image that comes from the file that was built in relationship to this person is displaced by the power person. And now this person is right back in relationship with the power person. This is the point. How many of you have ever been in a relationship where one day somebody turned to you and started to talk to you like you were somebody they didn't even know? And you said, who are you talking to? What do you mean? What are you talking about? Where does that come from? It's like you don't even know who I am anymore. Anybody had that experience? That was the day that you did a behavior that dumped you right into the power person file. The body, quote unquote, that came from the file they built in relationship with you was removed. The power person was put right in their place. All the clothing, the emotional, the mental, trauma clothing was put into your brain's image of you, and this person's right back trying to resolve it with their power person again. They don't have a relationship with you anymore. And that leads to behaviors that usually it won't take long before the reverse happens. This person will do a behavior, unless somebody's really conscious and doing the work, this person will then do a behavior that triggers the power person here, and this image that comes from the file that was built out of actual relationship with this person, that person will be removed, and the power person will be right back. Now, each of them is back in relationship with their power person, and this is where the rage really begins. Anybody's ever noticed it in a relationship? That's where it happens. Once you step into somebody's power person file, it's not easy to get out. You get a whole lot of that on you. It takes true conscious relationship. If you'll take that worksheet that we gave you and really work it, on the back side of the sheet we handed you, there's another copy of the worksheet. Go make yourself some copies. Go back through every relationship where you have ever been offended. And what you will find is each time you go in and look at that advice, you will start to open a darkened place within your mind where these dynamics are hidden. And as you start to erase them, you will start to dismantle not only the power person self, but the non-being self. You will stop identifying the person you're in relationship with as a body. You will develop faculties that are unknown in the body's world. You will develop faculties with which you actually enter into direct relationship with this other being. And that's when the fireworks really start. It is the end of the non-being self. Until then, it's pretty easy when you look at that. You've now got 6 non-beings and 2 possible beings in a relationship. It gets really easy to understand why relationships get so complicated. And it can sound really serious, but the truth is, as you start to get light in your being, and you start to bring your being, which is light, into your mind, you start to just take that stuff apart. And it doesn't have to be a big trauma game. It can actually be quite a pursuit for 2 people to join in and to clean up. It's a very powerful process when you begin to do that. Unfortunately, functioning out of the non-being self, the so-called love is really based in hatred. It's really about keeping this person in the posture, controlling this person, so that they function in a way that you don't ever have to look at your own pain directly. It becomes about using them. And this process is waking up. And if you've done relationship replacement with somebody, that's what I call this dynamic, where you replace your brain's image of them with your power person image. If you've done that relationship replacement, it takes some real commitment and some work. But what happens if you do that is the amount of healing and support that develops between 2 people who do that, it's monumental. And the aliveness and the being that comes back into expression is just beyond all imagination in terms of the quality of relationship that it creates. We live as human beings in a whole community inside of us from everybody we interacted with when there was someone who had more power over our lives than we do. We have a whole community in here. We tend to have more than one power person. The key that will tell you who your main power person is you look at the behavior that you do, that you hate about yourself, that you do when you become ultra stressed. And then you trace that back to who did that. And that's who your main power person is. That's your key, your primary power person. And that's where the greatest amount of work is to be done. The waking up that comes from that is the stepping beyond those 6 non-beings. And the world of non-being says that we marry our power person. You don't marry your power, you don't marry your power person. It's usually a parent. You never marry your power person. What you do is you marry someone who resonates the power person in you most deeply. You're attracted to that person because you have an unconscious drive to heal. You know, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder. You know, in this situation, if these people separate for a while, they'll tend to want to come back together in some kind of connectedness. And it's not because absence makes the heart grow fonder. Absence allows the power person image to die away, to get quiet in the mind again. But usually when they get back together and they say familiarity breeds contempt, familiarity doesn't breed contempt. When they come back together, it doesn't take long before the power person's triggered back into activity again. It doesn't breed contempt. It shows us the parts of our minds that we haven't dealt with. And we need to wake up to deal with that. And we'll be attracted to people as long as we're living out of the non-being self. We'll be attracted to people who do whatever it is that our non-being self received from our power person. So if it's that they beat us, we'll have a resonance, an attraction to somebody that beats us. If it's somebody that strokes us, then we'll have a resonance or an attraction to someone who strokes us. Whatever it is that we hold at this unconscious part. If you look at the relationships that you build out of non-being, you'll find an interesting phenomenon happens. That which attracted you to a person initially becomes the thing that repels. Because the attraction is out of these unconscious dynamics. When they become conscious, i.e., if somebody had a power person who was very powerful, and we've got somebody who feels very weak, they'll be attracted to somebody who's powerful. And then they'll get all peeved when they say, and you overpower me. Even though that was the thing that attracted them. The thing that attracts you is one of the things that will give you the greatest gifts when you start to go inside yourself and begin to utilize the forgiveness process. There's a really wonderful piece of writing that's in a book called There Is a Place by a man named Hugh Prather. And he really captures this beautifully. And so I'd like to share it with you. It says, at any given time, there's still a number of ways I have not forgiven. Simultaneously, within my readiness to heal, there appears in my life the person who does something I don't like. And what they do symbolizes my particular fault. It is necessary that I first look at that person judgmentally, no matter how brief that misperception may be. Otherwise, I would not recognize that I am refusing the means whereby I might see my own innocence. Another's fault is certainly their most valuable gift to me. It is a mirror that allows me to choose another reflection. Denial points to our work. The suppression that results is our disease. Projection keeps us out of healing. How do you tell if you're in projection? If you're taking that internal stuff and using it to build your brain's image of yourself or someone else, you will have some form of hostility or fear. If you begin to use projection wisely, it's a wonderful gift because it will show you everything that you need to heal. A gentleman named Carl Jung said this: one does not become enlightened by imagining inner figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The real work of Yeshua is about accessing the darkness that we hold that never belonged in a human system in the first place. In the Healing Through Relationships workshop, we have a commitment. And that commitment is about developing a different personal code than the personal code that comes from these insane dynamics that we tend to utilize. When you take that commitment, you can go to our website, whyagain.com, and download the commitment in any one of a dozen or so languages. That becomes another set of tools that will complement the worksheet that we presented you with today. One of the things to recognize is that whatever it is that you need to face in your life as an individual, you survived it on the way into your field, you'll survive it on the way back out. Healing is not Dr. Feelgood. Healing means that you get to look at everything that went into the field, and on the way back out, a similar set of symptoms is created by the healing process as created by the disease process. The energy on the way in feels and looks a certain way. On the way back out, it looks exactly the same. One of the keys becomes to take these tools, and as you forgive and those energies start to move out, rather than using them to build your brain's image of yourself or someone else, you utilize the tools to keep moving through the layers that never belonged in you as a human being in the first place. The truth is that you are a divine being that is made of love. We all know exactly what every newborn is made of. In fact, how about taking a minute right now and getting quiet, taking a breath. And imagine holding that newborn once again in your hands. Actually go back and let yourself feel the environment that you were in. Smell the smells, see the colors. Hold the newborn. Breathe deeply and allow yourself to breathe into the space of that newborn and really experience the active presence of love. And as you do, allow the face of the newborn to morph into your face. Experience your being as the active presence of love. Tap into, allow yourself to be the person who had all the power and person dynamics of their lives. But they held you and experienced your being as love. And now you be the person holding your own newborn, yourself as a newborn. And as you breathe deeply, actually move that newborn into and integrate it into your physiology, into your field. And breathe deeply. You are designed to be the active presence of love in the world. Allow that active presence of love that you are to move out from your physiology and touch every other person in this room. And as it touches every other person in this room, Allow yourself with those higher faculties, the faculties of being, to tap into the places where your being, your love, connect with the light and the being of each other in the room. And notice that the places where those energies connect redoubles the presence of love. And breathe deeply. The man named Yeshua 2,000 years ago said, do not hide your light under a bushel basket. The bushel basket he was talking about was the non-being self. The non-being self built into your mind of others, and the power person self. You've got to resolve the basket. Let your light come through that, and see the joining of the light of every person in this room expanding out beyond the borders of this room. And touching every person in this city. When you choose your being, when you choose love, on an energetic level, because of the laws of physics, you start to wake up the love in everyone. And so see that love expand out and fill this whole city. And awaken on still another level the light and the love in every person in this city. Breathe deeply and feel that energy come back to you and redouble the love in you once again as it expands out still further and covers the whole state. Allow that light to permeate every being in this state. And then take a deep breath. Allow it to go to still the next level and to cover the whole nation. 300 million people being touched by the presence of your light. Waking up the light in the unawakened. Strengthening in the light those who've already chosen to live in light. 2,000 years ago, Yeshua said, I am the light of the world. And he used exactly the same words in Aramaic except for the pronoun when he said, you are the light of the world. When you select light, you wake up the light in everyone. Allow that light of 300 million minds in this country to expand out beyond the borders of this country and spread out to the whole continent. Breathe deeply. Expand it beyond the continent to enshroud the globe. 6 billion minds touched by the fact that you've chosen light, that you've chosen to presence love in the world. In a world filled with a million stories about how love isn't practical, you've chosen something different because now you have knowledge. The ancient teachings say, for a lack of knowledge, my people have been destroyed. We didn't know how it worked. You now know how it works. As you select light, you wake up the light in everyone. And feel that strengthened light coming back into every cell of your own structure. Your human form is a physiologically devised system designed to experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the active presence of love in every cell. That's what you're designed for. The world wants to fill every cell. The world wants to fill every cell with the energy of hostility and fear, so there's not room for love. It's time to throw off the shackles of the world. world is insane. The loveless mind thinks hostility and fear protects it. The hostility and fear is the only thing that invites attack into our world. I join you in selecting to be the light of the world.